Hey everyone, it's Anthony Mosora with Anthony Mosora Health, and I have a treat for you today. I'm here with Shawn Sherman, and prepare for your mind to explode. So, Shawn, he is the developer of the Square One system. Shawn earned his exercise and sports science degree from the Penn State University and operates a private practice in Western Springs, Illinois. Over the years, Shawn has held numerous industry certifications and therefore understands what and how the conventionalists think and believe. Over the past 25 years, his understanding of movement has evolved from that of an apprentice level to a level of mastery by continually seeking answers to his questions. Because he now intimately and thoroughly understands the most basic components of movement, he brings an unparalleled perspective to the table. Not only does he consistently deliver absolutely amazing results to his clients, he teaches his students to be able to do the same. And it's just amazing on his website reading through the consultations that he's had, such as with the United States Olympic team, for wrestling, men's speed skating, women's soccer, the Chicago Cubs, Chicago White Sox, Chicago Blackhawks, Chicago Bears, and so on. There's a big list. And so just very grateful to have you on here, Shawn. Now, this is kind of interesting because it was actually a few years ago, one of my great mentors, Dr. Peter Glidden, had interviewed Shawn, and I watched that interview and my mind exploded. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. I know that Shawn was able to help Dr. Peter Glidden in a significant way with his functionality, with his movement. And so that got me interested. And over the last few years, I've been kind of seeing what's been going on, kind of hearing about what's going on. And then here lately, I've really kind of dived in to learn more about what Shawn's been doing. And so thank you for taking the opportunity to get on here, and let's go ahead and dig in. I'd be interested in hearing, Shawn, if you can tell me a bit about yourself, kind of what brought you to this point of where you are, and I'd be interested to go ahead and let loose.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on your program. And that introduction is like, it's kind of embarrassing, but the guy you read about sounds pretty cool. So it's funny. Yeah, I've been really so fortunate to have some pretty unbelievable opportunities to share my work at some pretty high levels. Not usually it's with individuals, but yeah, we've had some pretty cool experiences. So I guess your question was to share a little more about like kind of like my history a little bit and how I came to be doing what I'm doing. And I'm just a guy with a 4-year degree in exercise and sports science. So I started off early in my career as a personal trainer, and that whole time, prior to being a personal trainer, I had actually hurt my back playing high school basketball. And my dad had a bad back since before I was born. So back pain's always been kind of a part of my life, through watching my dad deal with his issues. And then when it occurred, or when I first incurred my back pain issue at about age 14 or 15. And so pain was always on the forefront of my mind. So when I was in high school, I really thought I was going to become a physical therapist. And then in college, I was really thinking about becoming a chiropractor. And I did some observational hours as part of my studies. And I really liked what I saw. And I had some chiropractic care, and it helped a little bit, especially the first time I went to a chiropractor. A little bit kind of limited in its ability to help me after that. But I was kind of thinking in terms of helping people who had pain. And then another little side note of my own little personal history, growing up in central Pennsylvania, our next door neighbor, it was called Walnut Acres. It was the very first organic farm in the entire United States. So I'm looking back at my history. I'm like, wow, I kind of always been surrounded by like alternative ways of looking at solving problems in this health area. So, so when I was in college, I goofed around a lot like I did in high school, and I had better grades in college than I did in high school, but I was really more interested in just playing pickup basketball. So, I was kind of like a B plus student in college. I did okay, but I really wasn't that serious in my studies. So that kind of ruled out me going to physical therapy school because that's very, very competitive. I had buddies that had like 3.95s and they, had to wait 2, 3 years to get accepted. And that was okay by me. I'm like kind of easy come, easy go. I'm like, well, that door was closed, and the only person I can blame is me because I was more interested in shooting hoops than I was in, studying for that organic bio or organic chemistry exam. So, so still thinking about health and kind of alternative care. And I was working as a personal trainer. I moved out to Chicago and had back pain. And here I'm working with all these people and doing different stretches and strengthening them and, trying to help them lose weight or help them with their back pain. And so I'm trying to help people with back pain, and I'm the guy suffering with back pain. I was absolutely clueless. And I kind of knew I pretty much knew I was clueless about that. So I never really put myself out there as someone who's helping people with back pain, but that was a very commonly stated goal that a lot of these people had. And, I'd visited a couple chiropractic schools in my early to mid 20s. And I don't know, there's this inner voice it was never really telling me to pull the trigger. So I just held off on it. And I just kept pursuing this, this fitness thing. And, what had happened was I took a job for about 10 months in sales, actually. So I got away from fitness and health and human performance for about 10 months, and I was selling conference calling, and I had zero passion for that. Now I was making about triple my income than I was as a personal trainer. So that's what lured me away. And I soon found out that I don't care how much money you pay me. I have to have passion for what I'm doing or I'm out, because this is at the time I'm like in my mid to late 20s. I'm probably 25, 26 years old. And I'm like, I'm going to be whatever it is I'm doing for work. I'm probably going to be doing this for 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 more years. So I'm going to shoot myself if I'm staying in sales. I just didn't like it at all. And so when I got back into fitness and I kind of reacquired my personal training studio that I had started about 4 or 5 years earlier, I really I was kind of scared. I felt like, oh my gosh, the whole world passed me by in these 10 months. I better start taking a bunch of classes again. So I should already taken I went to a bunch of different workshops because I didn't want to be the guy who was like kind of left behind, and things moved slower than I thought at that time. I didn't realize that really nothing really changed in those 10 months, but I had this weird fear that like everybody passed me by and I don't want to be that guy. I'm back into fitness and I want to be in the front of the class. I want to be leading this stuff. I don't want to be the guy I'm not a follower type person. I mean, I like to learn things and I don't mind being like in the student role, but I want to learn the best information that I can. And I want to help people as best as I can and be very proactive about that. So I ended up, I heard about this one course. It was coming to Chicago at this workshop, and it was about something about mechanical low back pain was part of the title of this course, and it was put on by the guys who started Muscle Activation Techniques (MAT). They're based outside of Denver, and I'd never heard of it. And so I went and watched these guys do their presentation, and I was like, wow, this is really really cool, and ended up becoming a student, an early adopter of that MAT system. And that was back in 2000 and that would have been 2002. Yeah, I've been 2002. So I ended up jumping into that course, and that was like a 8 or 10 month experience. I had to fly out to Denver 8 or 9 times for 3-day weekends. So it's fairly involved. I mean, you're talking, it's 24, 25 days of, 8-hour days, about 200-hour course. And I learned how to do neural response muscle testing there. So I'm eternally grateful for that experience, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for that experience. And so with MAT, it was really cool. Basically, the whole gist of that program is comparing the right side of the body to the left, looking for asymmetries of range of motion. So wherever there's a restriction in range of motion, MAT teaches us to view that restriction as protective muscle guarding. And so I became a zealot for that system because I was getting great results with my clients. I got personal help with my back pain. Wasn't perfect, but I was 80 or 90% better from MAT. I mean, it was very, very impressive, the progress that was made on my own body by that system. And that what I did with that system then too is I wanted to be like, all right, this is so cool. I'm helping a lot of people. Like 2 out of 3 people were getting phenomenal results. So I actually introduced it to the Chicago Cubs. So I was lucky enough that I got those guys to answer their phone. I just called through and got through the training staff. And, I got in for like kind of like an interview. I went in and showed them MAT, and then they ended up hiring me. And I was with those guys for about 5 or 6 years. I'm going to say it was probably, I could be off of my dates a little bit, but I think it was the '04 season. It was the year after Sammy Sosa was there, because everyone wants to know about Sammy Sosa, but I was never in the room with Sammy. Sammy was already gone. So I want to say, if my memory serves me correct, I think it was '04 through 2009. I was, the first and only guy at the time using MAT in Major League Baseball. A lot of cool success stories there. And then, kind of rambling here, but yeah, so kind of what ended up happening was I was using MAT. Like I said, I was a big zealot for it, and I was promoting the heck out of that guy's business, and we were, getting MAT was growing, not just because of me, but we were helping them grow here in Chicagoland. And in 2008, I had this one client that I had been working with him for about almost 5 years. I met this gentleman, Al Kamenecki, as a client. It would have been November or December of '03. So soon after I got certified in MAT. And after 2 sessions of working on him, I was able to produce 0 changes. Nothing positive was happening. So, and that was rare with MAT. Because MAT, every system has its shortcomings. But for any shortcomings it does have, it's really good at quickly changing range of motion on a very high percentage of people. It really is. And I was not able to do that with Alan. And I told him after 2 sessions, I said, man, I don't know what you stepped in, but I don't think this MAT is a good fit for whatever's going on with you. And he's like, hey, man, I'm going to stick with you because you're not a liar. Because I've been to all kinds of PTs, all kinds of chiropractors, massage people. I've been to all kinds of different titles. And they usually don't tell me that they can't help me until they've had 40, 50, 60 cracks at me. So the fact that you're telling me after 2 sessions that you can't help me, I know you're not lying to me, because you're willing to walk away from thousands of dollars. You could have kept this going. And I'm like, that's great. Thanks for the compliment, but I don't know what else to do with you, man. I kind of exhausted using this system on you. But he wasn't having it. So he just kept coming in to see me like once a month or so. So I was working with Alan like 10 or 12 times a year. And I just kept doing MAT on him. I'm trying to improve range of motion, trying to get some stability to his body, because MAT's whole view is wherever the body lacks stability, there'll be an associated lack of mobility to protect you from going further into a vulnerable position. And that's a good theory. It's just the problem with it is it's not the only source of restrictions in range of motion. And I didn't know that at that time, I didn't know that. So how I came to have my horizon like kind of blown away was when I was working with Alan Kamenecki in 2008. He was in for a session. It would have been September of 2008, and I said, "Hey, man, we're going to do no more MAT on you. I don't know what we're going to do, but I know we're not going to do any more MAT, because this is literally the definition of insanity. You keep coming back to see me. You're expecting a different outcome. I'm not. So you're the crazy person, not me. Like, this is stupid, man. Like, I'm not going to help you with this. I told you that, 50 sessions ago, and now we're whatever, 40, 50, 60 sessions in, and we're really no further along. His legs would get, bilaterally, he'd get numbness down his legs after we do MAT. And that system it's not like it's messing people up, for the most part or anything like that. But this guy was having really adverse reactions when I would do it with him, but I was his only source of hope. And here I'm telling him I can't help him. So what I did is, this guy's always cracking jokes, and he's like, all right, mocking me and making jokes about, well, what are we going to do? And like, dude, just shut up for 5 minutes, man. Let me think. I don't know what we're going to do, but just keep your yapper closed for like 5 minutes. And so then I came up with it. Hey, I don't know what we're going to do. I just know we're not doing MAT, and we're going to do the polar opposite. So if I'm thinking, hey, we're going to go right, we're going to go left. And if I'm thinking internal rotation, we're going to take an external approach or an external rotation approach to this. And that makes no sense, because here, if I see that you can't do something, why would I not try to help you be able to do that? So it didn't make sense at all to me. It didn't make sense to him, but that's what we did. And what Alan really presented with, the 2 big restrictions he had was he had no ability to internally rotate either leg. So I'd grab his legs, grab his ankle, and I'd check, turn it in one side and then the other. And he really, to this day, I don't know if I've ever had anybody this bad. He had maybe a degree or 2, like almost like, it's like someone poured concrete down his legs and his knees and his ankles. Like, he just couldn't turn in at all. It was weird. And nothing we did ever changed it. And then the other thing he couldn't do is when I put him on his belly, I would say it'd be like an analogous to putting a turtle on his back. I mean, this dude is stuck. You put him on his belly, immobile. He couldn't lift his head off the ground. Like, his forehead would be stuck on the ground. He couldn't even extend at all. from his, T-spine, lumbar spine, hips. He couldn't lift a leg off the ground. He couldn't lift his arms if they're at his side. They couldn't clear off the ground. So he was like glued to the table when you put him on his belly. It was nuts. And so what we did in that session back in September 2008 is I put him on his back, and all we did is we had him perform exercises into the anterior chain. So instead of trying to empower him to open up into extension, it made no sense to me because he had all this lack of ability to move into extension. It made sense to work on that. So here I was, hey, we're going to work on flexion. So we took him into forward movements. And so I put him on his back, and I just have him pick his head off the ground. So cervical flexion, and then just have him hold it for like 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and have him do posterior pelvic tilts. And so he had mobility going forward, but it's pretty weak. So he really couldn't do a sit-up. So I had to assist him into a sit-up. Then I'd hold his feet down and have him work very slowly the negative or the lowering phase of a sit-up, where he'd like be able to control it as best he could. He'd be shaken, and I'd have him try to do it like in 5 or 10 seconds. And that's what we did for about 45 minutes, probably just a little shy of an hour. And the next day he calls me and he's like, "What'd you do to me?" And there was like this urgency in his voice. And I'm like, "Oh boy." I'm like, "Did we really screw him up?" Like, I'm like, "Well, what happened? You okay?" He's like, "No, I'm great, actually. Like, what did you do to me?" I'm like, I don't know. Like what's going on? He's like, "Well, all my pain's gone." And he had like decades, like two and a half decades, like since the late 80s. And this is like, this is 2008. So he had, so I guess it'd been like 18 to 25 years out, 2 decades of back pain. He's like, I'm standing taller, man. I'm like 2 or 3 inches taller. And I just played golf this morning. I took 12 strokes off the best round I've shot since the late 1980s. And so I haven't broken 100 since 1988 or 89 or whatever it was. I just shot I think it was either an 88 or 89. So it's weird. So the year was 88 or 89 he shot it, and he either shot an 88 or 89 that morning. So whatever it was 11 or 12 strokes better than he's shot in years. And I didn't believe him at first. So that was the impetus moment behind what now we call square one. So then, that was nuts, man. So the continuation of the story is, for the next 6 weeks after that session, I was like, what just happened? It made no sense, but that's all I could think about. Like, cause it was like the best result I ever had, taking it as exact opposite approach from everything I'd ever been trained in doing. So my whole thing was like, look, I know MAT is not bad. I've not killed anybody with MAT. I'm getting 2 out of 3 people, getting some really nice results with this. But what about that third of the population that I'm not helping? And what about Alan? This is the best result I ever had. So this is like undeniable. Something else is at play here. So about 6 weeks later, I got a piece of paper out. I just wrote down a bunch of truths about the human body, the truths that I saw them as. I was looking for things that we could all agree upon. So they'd be like, this is like inarguable stuff. So I didn't want this to be like politics or something. Well, it's this or this, and everybody's arguing. I'm like, what do we all agree upon? Let's circle the wagons and let's get that down concretely. And then once I get that list, and it was stuff like when we go for a walk, we'd have opposite arm and leg swing. It'd be stuff like, no matter where we're moving or how we're moving, our body it's designed to always have our eyes looking straight ahead, flat on the horizon, so that we can maintain balance. So we have this visual input, we have vestibular input. We need to be able to not fall over when we're moving. So I just wrote down, it was a list of like 13, 14, 15 truths. And I looked at it, showed a couple of my buddies. I'm like, hey, any arguments here? Isn't this stuff that we all agree upon? And we did. So then I just started using every one of my clients as a test dummy. So I had this skill set of muscle testing that I learned from MAT. And instead of saying, oh, look, this lat failed or this glute failed, and then start regurgitating a story and completing the story, I refrained from making judgments. What I did is I started using those neural response tests as neural response tests. So instead of saying, oh, you got a weak muscle or this or that, it's more, oh, wow, check it out. We can detect change in the human body. And what I really want to know was, how is our body designed to move in light of gravity and the ground? Because I couldn't find it anywhere. Like, where are all the joint actions? There should be maps essentially telling us when the foot hits the ground, this is what your toe does, this is what your ankle does, this is what your knee does, this is what your neck does. And I couldn't find it anywhere. So that's what I sought out to uncover. And I found it like right away. It was crazy. So after about 3 clients, literally buried within our body. I've unearthed these 4 maps, and really it's a joint by joint action map that details how all the joint actions are involved in going right and left, which is locomotion, and how we go up and down, which is to get upright, or like a static posture. So it's really these 2 base patterns of, essentially, it's, you call it posture and movement, you call it get upright and locomotion. But we have this joint by joint action map that I basically, that's the big thing that I've discovered. That's probably the biggest thing I'm ever going to discover. I mean, it's like, it's going to be a massive contribution to the industry as people gain an understanding of how important it is to have that basic understanding of human movement. So that's a fairly long version of the story, actually. That's kind of, a lot of the details are in there. So
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I
yeah.
appreciate you getting into detail. That was beautiful, and it's
Oh, thanks,
inspirational, man. I really, I think about that curiosity that you had, many, many, many questions, and how you were open to learning. You were thirsty to figure out this problem. And in the case of that gentleman, Alan, that you were speaking with, and how you just kept going forward. You were honest. I think that's a big lesson for so many people, is when we deal with various problems that we come across in our lives, we have to be honest. I mean, if we want to make the most out of it.
Yep.
And in your case, I really appreciate the integrity you had. After a couple of visits, you're like, look, I don't know how to help you, essentially. But the fact that you're able to admit that, and then actually move on and be willing to continue to learn, to experiment, to ask questions, because that's a big problem I think that's facing a lot of people. Is we come up to a problem that we can't seem to get on the other side of. Perhaps we were leaning on a particular methodology or set of information, and now we've come to the realization that it's not working. So the question is can we be honest and be able to work through the cognitive dissonance in order to grow? Or are we just going to kind of pretend that, oh, well, let's just keep going, and not admit where, hey, we have a time to learn here. We have a time to perhaps question our paradigm, our worldview, and see what we may be missing, and to go forward as objectively as we can, and be willing to have these experiences. So thank you very much for sharing that. And
man, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, I like how you said all that too. It makes me think of this one quote I heard from, you familiar with Jordan Peterson at all?
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's his quote or if it's a paraphrase of something he heard, but I'm sure, I don't know if maybe he's the guy that originally said it, but I heard it from him first, was in order to become a master, you have to first become an idiot. I'm like, that's awesome. I love that, because I feel like I knew I was an idiot. I'm like, I don't know how the body is designed to move. I got my 4-year degree in this, took all these classes, and nobody actually taught me how the human body was designed to move. So I knew I was an idiot. I knew that we're all idiots. It's just, okay, who can admit it first? Like, it's almost like the first guy to admit that he's an idiot wins, because it's like, okay, cool. Now I have this, clear the table. Like, now I know I don't know anything. Now I'm a much better student. I become much more like a sponge when we start realizing that we don't really know that much. And something as complicated as the human body and the human movement system, I would say, like, I tell my students, like, look, man, you drove here in a car and you got the directions to get here using your cell phone and Google Maps, but, and man made those things. But I believe that God made the human body, and what he didn't give us? He didn't give us the owner's manual. So there's a lot left for us to discover. We don't know how all the parts work together. So I feel super grateful that I have like a very clear understanding about one specific little piece of it. And that one little piece, that knowledge, that it's like a lot of depth and maybe not a lot of breadth, but that sliver of knowledge I have, it's so impactful, because we're really getting deep into this whole issue of this internal perception that we have of our movement system. And once we understand how it's supposed to work, the old saying, like, you have to know how the machine is supposed to work before you can fix it. We have a very clear understanding of the neuromechanics of human movement. So I'm grateful. It's crazy. It's like, the more I realize I'm an idiot, the more I learn, and the more I'm able to help people. It's really amazing how that happens. It's probably like a Chinese medicine, like a yin to yang thing, It's like you have to, like, empty yourself in order to get filled up again a bit.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the lessons I think I learned from your story was you were willing to step back and reflect upon the very basics,
Mm.
like you said about movement and really getting down to the basics, taking the time to really understand the
Hmm.
fundamentals of movement.
Yeah.
I think any time where I can reflect on my life and I've seen some level of success in that particular area is when I was able to really get down to the basics, to break it down. It can be kind of arduous, but when you can really get a good grasp on those basics, then that allows you to go forward
Yeah.
with a better wherewithal to deal with it because you understand you have a solid foundation. So I think that's wonderful. That's a good example right there of that. All right, Shawn, I really appreciate you sharing that. Now, I know you've seen a lot of people, you work with a lot of people, and so I'm curious to see and to just understand more from your perspective, the sort of people you have come in, the sort of
Mhm.
conditions they may have, and kind of some examples of how you work with them and the sort of things you see people be able to achieve with this particular approach.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we've seen almost everything. Like we've seen like all kinds of different conditions, from Parkinson's and strokes and Bell's palsy to, high level athletes that are just looking for an edge. The most common people that we see, and therefore, I don't know if I feel most comfortable with them. I feel comfortable working with anybody, but the most common stuff we see, it's hip and back pain. I mean, everybody, it's like they come in, it's like they're there, they come to see us because they have neck and a back issue. They have an ankle and a back issue. It's like back pain plus something else. So it seems to be the most prevalent condition that we do see. And our success rate of, it's hard to say what constitutes success when we're talking about pain because it is subjective. But I guess in my mind, I'm pretty stringent and pretty harsh as a judge of what is actually a success. Because to me, it's like if I make somebody feel better for 10 minutes or a half hour or 2 days, I wouldn't call that a success. So to me, success, I guess, generally would be, if we got them 80 or 90% out of pain that they've had for, a decade or two, that's pretty good. Now, if you give me a kid who just had back pain and it's been going on for 3 weeks, I'm not happy unless we get them at least 99% out of pain. I mean, I'm looking at, we should be absolutely pain free because it's just a different, different person, different situation. So our success rate with pain, because that's the most common reason that people will find me, is we're probably above somewhere at 90 to 95% success rate. I mean, so it's a very, very high percentage. It's not perfect, but it's remarkably high. And I know it sounds like we're making that up. And I totally understand how that sounds because I was looking for pain relief and I never heard anybody talking about that kind of success rate. But what we're doing is we're tapping into the sixth sense of the body. So touch, we're thinking of skin, and we're thinking basically it's how we get sensory input from the outside world, from the environment outside of our physical bodies through touch, through skin receptors is touch. But we also have like this internal feel, and that's called proprioception, and that is the sixth sense. So this internal feel is really sensory input coming back to our brain from our muscles, our tendons, our joints, and it gives the brain, gives the central nervous system kind of ability to create mental pictures of how our joints are positioned and moving. And that's, technically it's called proprioception. So lately when I've been talking to people about it, I'll talk about external touch and internal touch. So external touch through the skin and internal touch is proprioception. So really, it really is in my mind, the sixth sense. But because we have this pretty amazingly clear understanding of how the brain and the body is supposed to interact with the ground in order to create this proprioception and awareness of this inner space. With square one, my system, we're able to find the deficiencies within a person's proprioception. And so basically it's this kind of this perception that the ground is unsafe versus when things are functioning well, the brain perceives that the ground is safe. And we're looking at that not in a general sense, but a very specific sense as it relates to joint actions like turning your head, lifting your leg, leaning sideways from the low back. So we're able to essentially almost said calculate, but we're really essentially able to read the body and find out where the brain is perceiving that ground force is unsafe. And then all we do in order to rectify that or correct it is have the person perform very low grade isometric contractions, and that'll actually change a person's perception of that unsafe space, unsafe joint action to where it's safe. So we're literally changing how we are perceiving our inner awareness, inner touch. So when we do that, we're able to basically reset proprioception, and so much aches and pains, so many times it's so tied into a false perception of that inner reality. So when we change that, we're able to see people's pain diminish or be eliminated in 1 session, 2 session, 3 sessions. It's that quick because we're not trying to change their tissue. So if we want to change your tissue through strengthening and cardio and more traditional measures, which is all great stuff, it takes a long time to change tissue. It takes, they say 6 weeks to change muscular tissue, and at least that long probably, or similar length time to change bone. But we're able to change that perception instantaneous. And so if we can change those inputs to the system, it's like melting the ice. It's making the body, making the brain feel more comfortable, and it's in its own skin, really, and how it relates to the ground. So if we're able to change these unsafe perceptions of ground forces coming up through your body, so when your foot hits the ground, when you're walking or you're standing up, ground force comes up through the whole body, and in a millisecond, the brain can ascertain which joint actions are safe for ground force loading and which ones are not. So we're paying attention to the ones that are not. And then we're actually having the client fix themselves from the inside out, because I don't take a superficial approach. I'm not rubbing them. I'm not cracking them. I'm not forcing and imposing my will upon their body. We're literally just pinpointing precisely where that person subconsciously has an aversion to certain joint actions. And then we're just changing that. So the client's doing all the quote unquote heavy lifting, but that heavy lifting is like these isometric contractions that require like 3, 4, 5 pounds of force. So it's not a force output like a strengthening issue. It's a change the perception issue. So because of that, we're able to work with so many different conditions. I'm not a chiropractor. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not a doctor. So I'm merely reporting the types of people we've worked with that have these named conditions. And it's not that I don't care about those conditions, but my knowledge of what those conditions are and knowing their etiology and the chemistry around it, all that, it doesn't help me solve the type of problem I'm trying to solve. But what we're really looking at is what's going on between your ears. How is that perceiving the ground? Because if it perceives the ground as a threat, we got problems. We can do all the strengthening and stretching in the world and have a temporary impact. But as soon as the brain kind of comes out of its stretch induced stupor, as I call it, because you're really just retarding the brain's ability to get a clean feel of the ground when we do classical stretches, because it actually stresses the nervous system, kind of tamps it down so it isn't as sensitive. But once the lights come back on, the brain senses like, oh, I'm still having to avoid this position and that position, these joint actions. That stretching and the strengthening that was alleviated the pain temporarily, it's going to come back because we never really changed that internal perspective or that internal perception. So what we're doing is we're changing that internal perspective and that how the brain is perceiving the ground. And when we do that, I don't care if you've had usually it doesn't matter what type of stroke. I mean, there's probably, we haven't had 100% success rate with strokes, but we've had pretty nearly miraculous changes with strokes and Bell's palsies and things like that. But someone comes with aches and pains, and we know that it's not, or we're pretty sure that's not a fracture or something like a structural issue. They've been looked at by a doc or they've been looked at by a PT, and they can't find structural damage. That's where we shine with this, because the brain's perspective and the perception of the ground, it's not going to come out in an MRI or an X-ray. So we're able to try to find, or not to try, we're able to find out precisely where the person has an issue, change that, and then aches and pains just go away real quickly for almost everybody. Not everybody, but almost everybody. Yeah, sorry. That was a lot. Sorry. Need a drink after that.
No, I'm just blown away, quite frankly. My mind is exploding intermittently here.
Doesn't it make sense though? I mean, as much as it might be rambling a little bit, but doesn't what I say kind of make sense?
Oh, I could listen to this for a long time, man. I could listen to this a long time. This is very fascinating to me.
It is. I love it, man. It makes me happy to make, because that's how I feel. I feel geeked up about this stuff, because I tell everybody, if you've seen what I've seen, you'd be freaking out of your mind too. It happens all the time, man. These changes we're seeing are just so cool. And to be able to help people that have been suffering and they're running out of hope because they've just pursued the traditional means, which there's a time and place for the traditional stuff. There is. I'm not trying to be the guy that poo-poos traditional stuff. We need medical people for emergency situations. We got to remember what they were taught. They were taught emergency care, life saving. Like, that's awesome. That might be the most important job. They're literally saving lives. I don't want to steal their thunder at all. But once the fear of death, like, oh, it's not, death isn't imminent. That's where they start like losing their luster. They don't get wellness and increasing capacity and things like that guys like you and I care about. So.
Very well said. Yeah, definitely. And as someone who's worked in the conventional medical system and the holistic arena, have my foot in both worlds, and I've been working in a variety of roles in the hospital setting for coming up on 13 years. I've been a registered nurse for a little over 6 years. So I've seen a lot of people as someone working on the front lines at their most vulnerable and sick moments.
Mm.
And so I can definitely, say that conventional medicine, just like you so eloquently stated, is definitely a time for it, right?
There is.
It's trauma care, surgery when absolutely needed, handful of infectious diseases, emergency care, like they can save lives, and they do.
Absolutely.
And so thankful for that. But when it comes to chronic problems, and especially chronic pain, the emphasis is so much on managerial interventions,
Yes.
pain medication being
Yes.
one of them. So let's mask the pain. Well, there can be a time for that, but
Sure.
the big question I have in my mind, as someone who's a nurse and health coach, and who's more and more becoming holistically oriented, is what can we do to help support and promote this person's optimal health and their strength and their ability to be self-sufficient,
Yeah.
and I kind of had an aha moment when you were telling me about this, because I have some friends that are physical therapists and occupational therapists,
Mhm.
and I see them work with these patients, and it's frightening, man.
Yes, it is.
I see these patients, especially when they're like in their 70s or 80s, they come into the hospital. Perhaps they're in intensive care. Um, Perhaps they're just so acutely ill that they're not able to get up, or for some combination of reasons, perhaps it's
Mhm.
staff shortages, bureaucratic things that get in the way, et cetera. There's a lot of variables, I think, that result in people becoming dangerously immobile. They're just not
Yep.
mobile the way they need to. And so these people lose so much strength. They become so debilitated that then oftentimes they have to get some sort of extracurricular therapy. Often they have
Yeah.
to go into an ECF to get rehabilitation. And so and I think part of that too, and I had a physical therapist friend of mine present on this, is there's a culture of fall prevention in the hospital. There's a culture of, let's do what we can to prevent bed sores. Let's do what we can to prevent urinary tract infections and central line,
Mhm.
bloodstream infections. Let's do what we can to avoid falls. That's all great. But
Yes.
when we get so focused on keeping people safe, which
Yes.
is good on one hand, but on the other hand, if we're also not talking about, okay, what can we do to strengthen this person, which
Yes.
will actually help them
Yes.
not fall as much and prevent falls, if we can make this person stronger. And
Right.
what you're bringing to the table, it's kind of an aha moment for me. Is like,
Yes.
you're the missing piece that, a lot of these hospitalized people need,
Yes.
because some of these people are extremely debilitated,
Yes.
but they're so afraid. And I see that when I'm helping these people. I get on the side of the bed and I have the gait belt. Maybe I have another person with me, and we're just transferring them to the commode,
Mhm.
transferring them to the table or to the chair. And there's just this fear of falling, and those in
Yes.
the healthcare industry, or would be better described as a disease management industry.
Yep. Yes.
We are so focused on, oh, don't let them fall, don't let them fall, keep them safe, which is again good, but I think there's much needed progress in how can we, look at this as a situation where we can help strengthen the person so that they can actually walk with a more optimal function and movement. They can actually be strengthened to where they're not living a fear-based life, but rather an empowered life.
Right. Or they're going to be right back in there for some other condition in 3 months because they're going to fall. I mean, it's like I think like I have an image in my head of someone who's like going underwater, and they're kind of bobbing up and down. They're in the air, they're underwater, and you're just trying to get them barely above water. Like, well, that's not a recipe for a robust, healthy life. I mean, it's just just enough to release them from our care. Like that, we got to do better. I think the industry should want to do better than that. And I think they do, but you said, hey, there's between a lack of knowledge on how to do it and then like more, staffing issues and more political issues and all that kind of stuff going on too, that I'm not even aware of. Thankfully, they don't have to live in that world, because every time I talk to people who work in that world, it just sounds horrible. I mean,
like we said, it can save your life, but I also have become more and more passionate and serious and committed about the idea of, okay, so what can I do as a health coach? What can I do as somebody who's focusing on prevention, focusing on health optimization, to help strengthen these people, help optimize their health in a way that they don't have to go to the hospital if at all possible, or it can reduce the amount of times they have to go, and to help them live a longer life and a more quality of life.
Right.
More quality of life. And that is one of the reasons why I'm so thankful to have learned about people like you. And what I really love about this, I mean, you're definitely just from this amount of time we've talked, just to kind of get more and more of an understanding of your thinking during this evolution of Square One and how it came to be. I love how your brain works and breaking it down, asking a lot of questions. And it's just fascinating. I know that you're already successful in what you're doing. Obviously, the track record that you've provided on your website and through, coming on here and talking about what you're doing, it speaks for itself. The proof of the pudding's in the eating, as Dr. Glidden says.
Yeah.
But as I'm listening to you more and more, I'm thinking, wow, this is so needed, what you're talking about here, this focus. So I wanted to ask you actually, because I know that you've worked with really, high-end athletes. I'm kind of curious about the opposite side of the spectrum. What are some of like the people you see? I'm just kind of curious, like when you're working with some of the people on the opposite side of the spectrum, what can you do for even some of the weakest or the ones that have some of the biggest mobility challenges out there? I'd like to kind of get an understanding of the range of people, because I'm more familiar with the optimization part of it, or perhaps people that are dealing with some chronic pain and have some maybe moderate movement. But what is kind of more of the highly acute segment of the population look like? Do you have people who are just like really, really debilitated, and how would you interface with them in that situation?
Yeah, we've had some crazy stories of people that are very debilitated that we've helped. I wouldn't say it's the typical person I get, just because I'm not in like a hospital setting. I'm not in a PT clinic. We tend to get a lot of, like I said before, chronic pain and hip and back pain, shoulder pain, all that. But we do get people too, like post-surgical, in that a lot of times they have the surgery and then they're under the care of a PT for, oftentimes, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks sort of thing. And they're often, they're not a lot better. They kind of, like you just described, like just helping them get out of bed and things like that. And then oftentimes 2 months later, they're still not in a really good place where they're, maybe technically could be released from the hospital, but they're not able to get out and go get groceries and things like that. We've had crazy stories of people that have been borderline debilitated from, whether it's surgery or underlying condition that led to that surgery. I'm just trying to think of specific stories. I know my one relatively recent, the last year anyway. It's been a weird year with COVID, obviously. So this is probably about a year ago, but really I've only been in my facility like 4 months or 5 months of the last year, it seems like. But with this one guy, he's a physical therapist. He's a buddy of mine, and he tore his Achilles tendon, and pretty severely. I believe it was 75%, 80%. So it was almost a full thickness tear of the Achilles. So that was very debilitating. And he is a physical therapist. He did it in a bounce house, like one of these jump things with his kids, or he's climbing walls and stuff, and boom, blew it out. And so he came in, he's limping, and he's very aware of what I'm doing. He actually has taught elements of my system to other people. So he's taught alongside me sometimes. And he came in and he has this crazy gimp. I mean, it's really, really gimpy. And he's wearing a boot when he's not with me. So he may have been on crutches the first session he came in. But in the end of the first session, we had his boot off, no crutches, and he's walking. It looks like maybe he had a mild sprain yesterday, so it doesn't look like he's ready to run, but there's this perceptible, we had it all video documented. So it's actually on our Instagram account. If you go back to it's probably like last November of 2019. And the progress in 3 or 4 sessions where we got his brain to be more accepting of the ground, and the changes that happened is unbelievable. So we've had that, so post-surgical with Achilles strain. I'm trying to think about this. He did not have surgery now I think about this. So it was 80% torn. And yeah, so we actually were able to avoid surgery for him with that. We've had people that have had strokes. I have a twin brother. His mother-in-law had a stroke, and this was back in central Pennsylvania at the time. I'm living in Chicagoland, so I didn't really get my hands on her, but I had a student of mine that lived in my hometown that I got him connected. So I got Shirley, who had the stroke, connected with my student. Was my brain? I can't think of my student's name. Maggie. So Maggie and Shirley working together, and Shirley had her stroke 4.5 years previously. Getting around the house, she's using a walker. A little bit embarrassed to go outside. She didn't want people to see her. She was a little embarrassed to see people having pity on her and getting around with a walker. So she really was not 100% confined to her house, but she was very limiting, self-limiting her own activities and lifestyle because of a little bit of embarrassment. And so Shirley had also had RA, so she had rheumatoid arthritis. So in the first square one session that Maggie ran her through, she was able to do unilateral balance, or she couldn't balance for more than about a second on either foot, just like stand her left foot with the right foot up and vice versa. So she couldn't balance for 1 second on either leg. At the end of the first session, she was able to balance for 30 seconds per side. So pretty massive change in functional output. Second session, all of her pain went away, even from the RA. So second session, pain-free. Third session, normal gait came back, then used a walker, goes over to my brother's house, and she's showing off how she's going up and down steps, not even holding onto the rail. And she's getting around a house, flat surface with a walker for 4.5 years. So that's some of the stuff we've seen. We've seen Bell's palsy. I've only had my hands on a few people, and it's not like we can help every single Bell's palsy person. I think I've only worked with 3. And the one we had, so 1 and 3 at this point, nearly a full resolution of that facial paralysis in one 25-minute session. So the face droop, the eyes kind of just open all the time, and the smile's all distorted. Couldn't suck through a straw without water coming out of her mouth. In one 25-minute session, boom, smile came back. All that went away in one session. So we've seen crazy stuff like that. We've had a different student in Chicago who now lives in Boulder right now. So if there's people who are listening around Boulder, we have a really great student out there, Niall Bratcher. He's phenomenal. He worked with this lady in Chicago who had essentially the medical. This is back to the medical thing. The medical people saved her life. She had cancer. They actually they deemed that they had to do surgery to remove a cancerous tumor underneath her gluteal cleft. So kind of the top of the back of her thigh, right where the back of the thigh meets her buttocks area. And when they went in to kind of remove it, they didn't know how big it was until they got in there, and they ended up having to take more tissue out than they anticipated because they had arms and legs doing it spread out in there. So they removed her ischium bone. they removed 85% of her glute max. So they literally removed half her butt, essentially is what happened, right? So she was left with some very obvious deficits. So she's using a cane, and kind of like almost like a crayfish will move backwards. She would move sideways, like she couldn't move forward, right? Because she's missing her glute and she can't push off to move forward. And she had done 3 months physical therapy at the University of Chicago, like one of the most esteemed hospitals on the planet, and really no big change in functionality other than, how to get on and off a seat, how to get in and out of bed, kind of just showing how to work around her issues. So my guy Niall worked on her, and within 3 sessions, she could perform body weight squats in 10 sessions. And it's a lengthier one. I mean, this is a pretty big issue going on. In 10 sessions, she's able to walk with no perceptible gait issues, totally upright going forward. Honestly, to this day, that's probably still our best success story we've had, because it's just remarkable what occurred there. We have stories of people that have had kind of in between athlete and really messed up, where this athlete had a broken back and L5 vertebral fracture, actually in the state of Illinois or Indiana, at Purdue University, fractured L5 vertebra, holding him out of practices, still playing in games. They didn't know he had a fracture, actually. So the first time I worked on him, the MRI and the x-ray results came back the next day. Turns out he had an L5 fracture. But in that first session with him, he had 13 positions we could replicate his pain. We got rid of 12 of 13 positions that produced pain. Went down to West Lafayette to work on him because I said, look, I think we can help this guy. We had such a great first session with him. We go down there, got rid of all his pain, played the rest of the season with a broken L5 fracture. I mean, so that doesn't just heal if you keep playing basketball on it, but he was functional enough. The doctors cleared him. He finished out the rest of that season with the L5 vertebral fracture. So we've seen some really just unbelievable stuff. And I remember when we did that with that college basketball player, it was really funny. As the one coach was like, he was there in the room when I'm working on him, and he's seen this change right before his eye where he can't lift his leg off the ground. And then he's able to actively visit about 110 degrees of active hip flexion up from 0, like right before his eyes. And then we're done. And the coach is like, oh my gosh, like what's your best success story? I'm like, I think you're watching it. Your guy's got a broken back, man. We're not curing cancer with this, So it's really, I don't know. I mean, there's very few things that we've come across that we have not been able to help. There's been a few. Sometimes we run across something like an undiagnosed fracture, or some kind of underlying disease state that was undiagnosed. We've had people that are literally weeks and a few months away from death. Like they're in a death struggle with cancer, and they didn't know it because it only presented as hip pain or back pain. So we've had a couple of people like that we'll work on them, and we're just not able to get any kind of satisfactory functional outcome at all. And there's usually almost always a structural issue or sometimes a disease state type stuff. But most people are walking around with aches and pains, whether it's little or great, whether it's acute or chronic. And as we change their perception, there's very few things that we're running across that we're not able to make a massive impact with.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
that is such a big deal. And I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about these experiences, these things you've seen. It's just remarkable. There's so many people out there who are suffering.
Yeah.
And the more I learn, the more I go through this journey of life and I meet people such as yourself, this hope springs up like a fountain in my heart for these people, because it's just like you've come to the realization when you have those aha moments, when you realize that, wait, there's this wonderful opportunity here based on this new information to help really lift people up, to help them become stronger and healthier.
Yes.
Gives you great hope. And to hear of these experiences, because like I said, I think a lot of people, and if you're watching this right now, you may be deficient in hope, vitamin H here. And perhaps you've been working, and again, conventional medicine has its place, but perhaps you're not seeing the results you're looking for. Perhaps there must be some better way. And so I appreciate Shawn, appreciate you coming on here and talking about this. This just definitely gives me more of an excitement for life, quite frankly, because it gives me more hope of opportunities out there that we can really help people. And
And that's it. Like you're hitting it real close to what I'm about too. Because my whole thing is like I always feel like I want to give people like a real hope, not just a false hope. And that's what I feel so good about is like when I work with somebody, typically how it runs is if someone just reaches out to me and it sounds like something that we might have some success with, and we take them on as a client, I sell people a 3-session package. Right? It's 3 sessions. And it comes with a money back guarantee. And I'm not trying to promote myself now. I'm just letting people know like this is how cool this thing is. This is how effective it generally is. If we can't change a person's function, right? Because I leave it all up to their reporting of pain. Like someone could come in and lie, we get them out of pain or reduce their pain, and oh no, I'll know better, and then I'm working for free, and I can't do that. But if we don't change their pain, if we don't change their mobility, or we don't change their strength, so we have objective ways to gauge strength and mobility, and then the pain is subjective. But if we can't change something, some objective or subjective measurement, we give them their money back. And in the last 3 years, I've had one refund, and it's mostly because he didn't understand the guarantee, and I didn't have it in writing. He thought it was all about the pain, and I don't think he was lying to me, so I had no problem giving his money back. But we did improve his strength, and we did improve his mobility, and so we gave him more function. He just didn't reduce his pain, so I gave him his money back, and it's one in the last 3 years. So that's the kind of successes we're having with these things. So I love being able to give people hope. And if when we work with somebody, we can help them, I sleep well at night knowing that, like, look, there's a pretty darn good chance that we just ruled out that it's not a proprioception issue. It's not a sixth sense inner feel issue. So then at least, if nothing else, we've ruled out what it's not. And that still could help the next person who comes along who has a different set of goggles. Like maybe like, oh, it might be some kind of nutritional deficiency. It might be, hey, let's get a blood panel on you. There could be something else going on that nobody else has picked up because you heard it while you're playing sports, but it might be indicative of something else brewing underneath the surface that's like chemical in nature, that we don't necessarily directly deal with. So yeah, so it's so cool because it's like, all right, about a 90 or 95% chance we're gonna get rid of your pain. At least half of your pain's gone to all of it gone. It's nice because it's like, wow, we have that track history makes me feel good about the hope that I'm bringing to people. And if we can't get it, I don't want to freak them out. Like, look, there's got to be a reason. We can help you figure this out. We'll find a Glidden. We'll find somebody who's thinking outside the box from what they've already been looked at. There's other people doing other really great stuff out there too. We're not the only people that are doing awesome stuff. So, yeah,
that's great. Yeah, and I like what you just said there about there's a team out there. There's a team of people, a group of people, who also share this strong desire to really help people. And if that means they got to get out of their comfort zone and learn something else, I really appreciate people such as you, Dr. Glidden, Dr. Wallach. I could go on and on, really, who just continue to bring forth information that really is not conventional. It's not mainstream, but I truly believe if we can just continue to share this message and connect with people. And I know, as I continue to learn, like learning about you, I now feel like, hey, I've got another way I can perhaps help somebody, at least share the information. Hey, here's Shawn, here's his website. Get in touch with him, see how we can help you. Just having that awareness that, yes, there are multiple people out there, like you said, that have a lot of value to bring. Let's continue to learn so we can see what is available out there and be able to connect, be able to form these relationships that help dial in the sort of strategies people are going to need for their unique selves.
Yes.
To become stronger, to become healthier. And I think your message is especially important because there's so many people who have lost hope. There's so many people out there with the whole, Corona craziness going on over these months. There's a lot of people that just feel, like I said, deficient in hope, and maybe they're locked down. Their income has drastically changed. Perhaps they've been ill. They've gained weight because they're not out moving around as much. They're fearful. They've got the mainstream media, talking about it all the time. So they're just constantly living in fear and this lack of hope. And
Mm.
So when you hear something like what you're bringing to the table, on how, hey, if you're dealing with pain or a number of these
Hmm.
functional challenges, that, hey, there's a strategy out there that CNN isn't talking about.
Right. Right.
But, I'll tell you what, and I just have a feeling, Shawn, like I said, you're already doing a lot of really good stuff here. I just not going to be surprised if this just continues to blow up, and people more and more get to be aware of what's going on and start availing themselves of the value you're providing. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I look forward to connecting people with
Yeah.
you personally, because just enough when I heard Dr. Glidden tell his story, like
Right.
I'm a big fan, I'm a big fan of, you know, looking into the literature and seeing what sorts of, articles, scientific articles are out there.
Sure.
But there's something powerful, and I'm sure there's plenty of data on this information you're talking about, but as far as these various components, but when I consider the testimonials, like I said, proof of the pudding is in the eating, Dr. Glidden's testimonials, these testimonials, and I know that, we can't ever give necessarily 100% guarantee, because every person's situation is unique, but this
Right.
could be a great, very important missing tool
Mm.
for people to help optimize their health and their strength. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I wanted to ask you, so we just talked about hope and the sort of hope this approach brings to many people out there. I wanted to ask, so what is your hope for the future, on where this goes? I'd like to hear about, um, kind of the direction that you're wanting to head in at this point. If perhaps
Yeah.
uh, you have some ideas that you want to see rolled out in the future. I'd be curious to hear about that.
That is a great question. And I honestly think it's what's been holding us back on some levels, and there's this thing called the S curve of innovation, which is basically when you have something that comes along that's like disruptive to the mainstream. At first, it kind of is like this little flat line, looks like nothing's happening. So we're looking like as time moving from, I guess your left to your right here on the screen. As we move from the beginning, as things grow in time, at first when we have new innovations, it's kind of flat line, looks like nothing's happening. Then at some point, it starts picking up some steam, and all of a sudden, they hit this tipping point, and it goes nuts. And then eventually, what happens? It'll tail off because something comes along to supplant it. So it ends up looking like an S. So we're still kind of, I think we're at the very end of that flat line. I think we're just starting to pick up because there's just too many cool things going on. And again, I'm gonna be very reflective and say that I think the bottom of our S has been going on for about 12 years now. And some things just have to run their course, but I think it's mainly one big reason is I think I've been a little bit aimless because I got this weapon that's like it literally can help almost everybody. So it's like all I see is like a million targets, and like, okay, like yeah, we help athletes, we can help person with pain. So it's so like, how do I choose which one or two targets to go after? So that's I think been holding us back. And dude, seriously, it's funny, man. Like, if we had done this call 3-4 weeks ago, I wouldn't have the answer that I do now. I really think in the last 10 days, 2 weeks, I'm getting real close to what my goal is and what we're trying to shoot towards. And I think what it is long term. I envision having a movement trade school, right, where we teach people about how the body was designed to move, and the application there is for rehab, it's for fitness, and it's for performance. And it's all going to start off with like this square one piece, which in some people's minds might be almost like a culmination, like, oh, so complex or whatever. But to me, that's just the beginning. So we're going to have all of our students, just like if you were to go away to college and you got to take your gen ed, you got to take, a couple art classes, you got to take some math, you got to take some history, a little smattering of everything. Our gen ed, our basis is going to be the square one piece. So we're going to have this trade school that's going to be partially online and live is my vision, where we will train people how to do square one. And then we'll say, oh, but you're in the rehab sector. Now we're going to take it down this path. Oh, you're in a fitness or you're in performance. Because to me, it's like this, I see like a bouquet where it's all tight in the middle and it spans out in different elements, right? So we're going to have different tracks that you would be able to follow. And we're getting some really we're getting some big hitters that are starting to adopt my approach. So we can bring in some really hyper specific and high level information about the fine mechanics of a Major League Baseball swing, for example, or somebody like a Glidden who is going to talk about like, probably like molecular nutrition or something, So we have these interesting people like, oh man, I got my buddies in this industry that I think they'd be great at this piece. So I see us building towards a trade school, and where it all starts with square one. And then, so there'll be a couple of things at the beginning where we start with this common ground. And then it's kind of like pick your own direction and just offer some really cool education courses. Could be live, could be online. So that's what I want to build it towards. And then to get there, I think the main thing that I think that we're going to focus on is we're going to be focusing on high level athletics, I believe, so that we can get data, so that those who want the math, and we haven't hidden from that, but I just been one dude trying to get our message down and the curriculum and teach it and work on clients and attract new students. I've been a one-stop shop guy for a while, but we're getting some teams and some branches of special forces in the military that have been reaching out to us, that I think if we start getting a couple of these deals knocked out, it's going to be a springboard to collect really cool data on human performance. And then at that point, and I like being around high performers, it's cool, but I honestly don't care if I work around grandma that just had hip replacement or the best athlete in the world. I love just helping people. Like, I just want to be like, if I can help you make your dreams come true, I'm all for it, man. I want to help you do that. And so I don't care if it's a dude making $10 million a year or grandma down the street. I literally just like helping human beings get to the next step that they're trying to get to. But I think what we're going to do is we'll have this opportunity to collect objective data at an elite recognizable level, because then at that point there's our credibility. Like, whoa, this guy's doing stuff with X team and this team and that team, and he's actually teaching their medical staff on how to do this stuff. I think that gives us that forum and that voice that'll be like, oh wow, and now he's going to teach us how to do that. So that's how I see it going. I think we're going to try to go after be a little bit more intentional about collecting data and getting data on high performers, because we now all of a sudden through some of our students have access to some very high performers on a regular basis, and then use that as a springboard to build this trade school in the future. And I don't know time frame. I'll be pretty upset if we don't have our brick and mortar / online a full array of stuff in the next 10 or 12 years. But maybe it's in 4 years, maybe it's in 7. I don't know. I kind of feel like that's like kind of our 5 to 15 year plan, I guess. But in this past spring, we already put a lot of our information in square one and this other kind of a more regressed version called Sig 6. We have that already online in a online format, but we want to expound upon that and clean that up and evolve that and make it more interactive and build up from there. So we kind of got it a little bit started, I guess. So we're just kind of putting these pieces in. So that's how I right now see it going. But I've been wrong a lot about a lot of things, but that's right now. That's what I think that we're going to be driving this thing. So data at the high level, use it as a springboard to create a trade school to empower more. I mean, we're already empowering some people, but really, like, I would love to see us train 500 personal trainers a year and 1,000, 100 personal trainer or physiotherapists and 100 chiropractors. I'd love to see us being out there where we're working with 500 to 2,000 students a year kind of thing. That's where I see us headed, the 10 to 20 year plan, maybe.
Excellent, man. Well, thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, so going forward, if somebody who's watching this right now is like, hey, I want to connect with Shawn, or
Yep.
I want to connect with Square One, I want to go ahead and get started. Can you
Yeah.
explain how they could go about doing that and what that kind of looks like, and whether, maybe part of that is virtual or in person or combination of both, and kind of where they could go and get started?
Yeah, and we have like 2 different types of people generally looking for us. Someone who wants to become like a client or a customer or whatever, and then another person who wants to learn the system. So I have like almost like 2 different audiences. So for like pain sufferers or athletes or like athletic organizations, we want to come in and help them get better performance. I'll be more as a consultant. And then as far as teaching people, so we have some stuff online that people can have access to that. So either way, there's 2 main ways I think that are easiest to get a hold of me. The easiest way that I'm most responsive is a text message to my cell phone. So I'm happy to give out my personal number. I don't want people calling me and like trying to like sell me a bunch of stuff or anything, but I'm going to just put my trust in people and say, all right, they're going to be approaching me for the right reasons. But I never answer my phone, very rarely. But I'm usually pretty responsive to text messages, and my phone number is 708-261-8458. Again, 708-261-8458. Hit me up. Say, they can just reference you that, hey, they saw me on your program. Mention Anthony Moroso, and that'd be great. And then and the other way is on Instagram. Like, we have a presence a little bit on Twitter. I'm not on there that much. I'm not really on LinkedIn too much. Facebook a little bit, more ranting and raving about more political stuff, probably personally there. But as far as like specific to Square One, on Instagram is where I'm really focused on talking about what we're doing and sharing successes and point of view and things like that. So on Instagram, that's a great place to kind of stalk us a little bit. So it's not like you got to reach out to me and feel like obligated to buy something, but you can really check us out on Instagram, and you can send us a message if you want to go from stalker mode to reaching out. If you send me a message on Instagram, I tend to be very responsive on Instagram as well to those messages. So those would be the two things. So that would be at our handle there is at Square One System. And the number one is not spelled out. It's a numerical one. So it's Square, the number one System is how to find us on Instagram.
Good deal. Well, thank you for that. And
Yes,
definitely thanks for coming on here and explaining about what you've been up to. It's fascinating. I look forward to continuing to talk with you more, learning about it. Quite frankly, getting involved. I know a number of people that could really benefit from what you're doing. And so, one thing I wanted to go ahead and ask too, while we're doing this, is what would your thoughts be on possibilities in the future? Let's say if somebody was interested in having you fly out to them and perhaps put on a workshop, something like that, like maybe whether it's for a day or for 3 days. And, because I can think of, because of the network, and I'm getting to learn more people, like as we talk. I'm in Tampa, Florida. I just moved down here, around a couple weeks ago. So I'm getting more familiar and connected with people in the area. But I can just really foresee a possibility of having someone such as yourself. And in this case, let's say, would you be possibly available to come down and do like a day workshop or 2 or 3 day workshop if we had enough people and enough,
I love doing that. That's one of my favorite things to do. So we've done that in the past, where we bring the entire education piece to people, pieces of it. We've done that. I'm very open to that. I love traveling. I love going to different parts of this country and the world. So that is definitely part of our vision in the future, but we're already doing that. So, but yeah, and at this point, I do think that someday Square One, I would say I don't think it's a macho egotism thing. I literally think that Square One will ascend to where it's like, this is just how we prepare the body to move better, right? So it'd be like a precursor or right alongside physical therapy and personal training. But I think it's going to be big. But right now, we're not that big yet. So I'm pretty affordable at this point. So I'm more than happy to go if there's 3, 4, 5, 6 people want to get together and buy the biggest version of this. Like cover my flight, pay our normal price. So, all right. So it's our normal price, 3, 4, 5 guys split up my travel cost, and I don't need to stay at the best hotels or anything. So tack on another $100 a person. You could easily get me there. You get 3, 4, 5 people together or more. Oh yeah. We would easily be able to figure out how to do that that's really fun. And it's weird. Like, as much as I want to see it grow so more people get help, I don't know, man. There's really something I dig about getting together with 3 to 6 other people. So it's like so intimate, and I know they're going to be great. I mean, because it's like I get that hands-on. We can find out exactly what they're not doing and really help them. So I feel like I want to be more like a mentor, like a real world mentor to real people in this, instead of just like a talking, like, hey, here, buy another program. So I dig getting together in intimate groups and sharing this and helping people get really good at this. So I love that, man. That's one of my favorite things to do, actually.
Yeah, and thanks. It sounds like you have a willingness to do that. Let's say, perhaps to help mentor people and maybe teach them about what you're up to, but also, would you say you'd be open to, let's say, if we had a few people that were needing help and they
Oh,
lived
yeah,
in the
for sure.
area
Yeah.
and weren't able to necessarily travel to you. You could
Oh,
come
yeah.
down and
Yep.
work with.
And the same kind of thing. It's just like if we got 3 or 4 clients and they wanted this to fly me in, we just split up that travel cost, and I would just, hit them with our Chicago rate and say, hey, look, we usually sell 3 packs. So it'll probably be one of those deals where I get in for like 2 days, probably, because we had 2 or 3 people. Each person would probably get about 3 hours a time, maybe an hour and a half one day, an hour and a half the next. And yeah, so probably could handle 3 to 8 people, especially if it's at one location and just people show up and we do that. Absolutely. Like a traveling clinic, that'd be amazing. I, I almost want to give your audience, we give them like an awesome takeaway, right? If you want to do that way to be something they can apply today, would you want can I address that?
I would be definitely open to that. Sounds
All right,
great.
cool. Yeah, cool. All right. So if we think about what Square One does, and I know your audience hasn't really seen it, if you go to our Instagram site, you probably see some little brief examples of what a session looks like. It's not scary, it's not painful or whatever. But the main intervention we're using is it's really conscious intent wrapped in an isometric contraction. And in a Square One session, it's very, 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 very specific. It's our sniper rifle product service where we're not guessing, man. We're like, it's a headshot right between the eyes every friggin' time. I mean, as far as this is right now where this person has a problem with the ground. So then we have a regressed version of that called Signal 6. And that was geared towards people that are working with groups of people, like a strength coach, like in a college or a pro setting, because as great as Square One is, it's a one-on-one thing, and these people are working with groups of people. So Sig 6 is a little bit not as specific as a sniper rifle. So that's a blind hand grenade toss, right? It's like, all right, the problem's kind of this area. Here's some stuff you can do. There's no assessment. There's no skill. Now, if we go a step even further, like what are things that like your audience could do right now that might inadvertently help them? And again, this is not a right between the eyes shot. So we're not going to have a 90% success rate with what I'm about ready to tell you. But I really think 20, 30, 40%, I think a sizable minority of people who are listening to this, if they do what I'm about ready to ask, I think a lot of them are going to get themselves out of pain. All right. So no charge. I mean, Anthony, if you want to charge for this and turn it into an information product, go for it, dude. But it's really all it is we're using this conscious intent because we're going to try to match up conscious intent where your brain can't interact very well sending these motor output signals to joint actions, and then the motor output signals never get sent. So then the brain is going to receive faulty sensory signals coming back like, oh, well, there's a problem here at knee flexion or cervical rotation or shoulder flexion or some joint action. And it's going to continue that cycle as we move around and do our activities and we do exercise. We're really building function. We're building not even function. We're building strength and endurance and just the ability to do activities on a dysfunctional base. So in order to help stop the bleeding, we're recommending that people do isometric contractions and do it throughout the whole kinetic chain. Now, what that looks like to people more practically is I'm saying take all the passive stretches you've ever learned, the stuff where you're yanking your arm across your body or you're plopping your leg up on a bench to stretch your hamstrings. That's all passive stretching. You're using gravity or you have a partner assisted deal or a band assisted where you're trying to take your joints further than you can currently go actively. You're going to take all that and just actively visit joint range of motion extremes. And if you want to be as close to sniper rifle as you can without having any ability to assess or any kind of deep understanding of this stuff, I would recommend starting in the low back and the hips because that's where a lot of people have issues. So literally, I'm going to verbalize this, and maybe there's a way I can get some pictures over to you, and maybe you can add that as something they could go to on your website. But I'm thinking we would just have them lay on their back and do a spread eagle or open leg scissor or like a snow angel. But instead of going in and out with your legs, you go out as far as you can and spend time contracting out into the position as far as you can. 10, 20, 30% effort, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then reverse it. Squeeze your legs together. So now you're working the musculature of the inner thigh. And same idea, 2 or 3 seconds of squeezing out, 2 or 3 seconds of squeezing in. Then you can do something like bend your knees and lift your butt up into the air. And if there's pain, let pain be your limiting factor. Don't push through pain, but just raising your butt up in the air as far as you can, unless there's pain. And just be careful to bail out because you might get hamstring and glute cramps if you haven't done this in a while. And just maintain that position for 3, 4, 5 seconds. And then the counter move that is let your butt come down. Right now, I'm verbally walking through it. Your knees are bent. I want you to do a straighten one knee, lock it out, and lift that straight leg up in the air as high as you can, 3 to 5 seconds, hanging out there for 10, 20, 30% effort, couple seconds, switch legs. Great. If that's all people start doing, it's not a very exhaustive list. I just basically, I just told you 3 or 4 of the main pieces that I'm always resolving for people, right? We're seeing a lot of hip abduction issues and hip extension issues. So I'm not saying that we're going to have a 90% success rate, but I think if your followers have hip pain, back pain, even maybe neck pain, knee pain, if they start with that, legs apart, legs together, bridge, one leg up, other leg up, and no assistance, use their own strength. And don't worry about building intensity. I would rather they build frequency. I'd rather them start doing it 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. Spend 1 minute here, 1 minute there. So it's not a huge investment of time, and it's zero investment of dollar. So it's free, low risk. I just got to think that a certain percentage of your people are going to be like, oh my gosh, my back feels so much better now. The car ride's better. So that's one thing I'd like to give to you guys. Just start there. That's a good place to start.
Shawn, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a good taste of just some of what you have to offer. And thank you for providing
yeah,
that so freely here. And
yeah,
so, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
yeah.
Anybody watching this, I'm going to have information below this video uh, about Shawn, more information on how you can get in touch with him. He's already so well, he's very much articulated that well himself. But I have that information. I'll put that below this video. If you have any additional questions as well, you can reach out to me. My thing is that I'm happy to do what I can to help support you as you endeavor to have a more healthful life, as you strengthen, as you really just optimize your health. And so, Shawn, thank you so much. I look forward to continuing in the future with our conversations, our collaboration. I really think there's a great hope here in the future with what you're doing. I mean, you're already doing a lot, and I appreciate the good work you're doing. And I think the future looks bright. So, uh,
Awesome. I agree, man. Thanks for having me on your program. You've been such a gracious host and giving me your time and giving me this platform to get my voice out there. So I appreciate you, man, and everything you're doing too. So thank you very much.
thank you so much. All right. Well, hey, you take care and to your prosperity and health.